This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Jonathan Bennett, Dan Lynch, Katherine Druckman, and I are guests of each other in a roundtable discussion of all kinds of things about open source, past and future. That's coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 640, recorded Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. Open source, past and future. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Bitwarden. Get the password manager that offers a robust and cost-effective solution that can drastically increase your chances of staying safe online. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. Good morning, good evening, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Doc Searls, and this is FLOSS Weekly. And this week, a very special week, we are with ourselves. Our guests are each other. So there's Jonathan Bennett, Dan Lynch, and Katherine Druckman, all for those of you blessed with video lined up in a row. So we'll check in from at least where we are. I'll tell you, I'm in New York City, so that's what you're not seeing behind me. So where are you coming from, Jonathan, since we're going left to right here?
All right, I'm back in the corporate lair here in the home headquarters in Lawton, Oklahoma.
And Dan, you're in Liverpool, I assume.
I am, yeah. I'm in Liverpool, where we've had thunderstorms and lots of nice seasonal summer weather for over here. Thunder, lightning, torrential rain. All good.
That's what they have in Texas. Isn't that right, Katherine?
Yes, a lot of that. Yeah. A little traumatized, frankly. I can't. The mere mention of rain, it's just, oh, man.
Floods, tornadoes. Flying on United,
it feels like weekly
through Houston is horrible. I mean, because you're approaching and they say, "Oh, we got a thunderstorm there. We're going to circle over under this other thunderstorm for a while that one goes by."
Yep.
Yeah,
sounds about right.
Yeah.
I don't have one to share with you today, though, so hopefully my mic will be quiet.
I've got it over here. We imported the thunderstorm from Texas. I think that's what.
Apologies for that.
Yeah. On the East Coast here, we've had terrible air quality with orange skies from fires on the West Coast, like 3,000 miles away. So it's a welcome to Earth. Anyway, so we have a bunch of topics we're going to talk about. And before we jump into those, I want to let you know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Bitwarden. Bitwarden is the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used at home, at work, or on the go, and is trusted by millions. Empower your employees to follow password management best practices. With Bitwarden, you can securely store credentials across personal and business worlds. Every Bitwarden account begins with the creation of a personal vault. Use Bitwarden for your business. It's fully customizable. Adjust features using enterprise policies to adapt to your business needs. Use Bitwarden Send, a fully encrypted method to transmit sensitive information, whether text or files, directly to anyone. Team members can generate unique and secure passwords for every site. You get enterprise-grade security, and they're GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, and SOC 2 compliant. Their end-to-end encrypted vault helps mitigate phishing attacks by storing passwords and more. Now you can do even more with the Bitwarden Enterprise Plan. Some of their new features include Admin Password Reset. Enterprise organizations can enroll in Admin Password Reset to allow designated administrators to reset forgotten user passwords. Master Password Reprompt. Use the new Master Password Reprompt option to require verification of your master password. Interested in a business plan? Bitwarden has plans that will work for you. Their Teams organization option is $3 a month per user, where you can share private data securely with your coworkers, department, or entire organization. For enterprises, use Bitwarden's Enterprise Organization Plan for just $5 a month per user. Their free organization plan includes 2 users who can store and share secure passwords. Bitwarden believes that everyone should have access to basic password security tools. Individuals can use their basic free account forever with an unlimited number of passwords or upgrade any time to their premium account for less than $1 a month. And if you're looking for secure password storage for your entire family, their family organization option gives up to 6 users premium features for only $3.33 a month. Using the Bitwarden Cloud, you can get started in no time. Monitor and manage security vulnerabilities using the Bitwarden Vault Health Reports. Identify exposed, reused, weak, or potentially compromised passwords, as well as any items in your vault with inactive 2FA, two-factor authentication. Get started with a free Teams or Enterprise trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan at bitwarden.com/twit, or try it for free across devices as an individual user. That's bitwarden.com/twit. Okay, team, we're on board here. Again, we have Jonathan, Dan, and Catherine, irregulars on the show, all of them. We try to make them all take turns, and so it comes out unevenly, I think. So we have on our shared document here a number of topics, and I wanted to get started by sort of framing this up in a way that isn't about news that might be stale in a week or so, but really are enduring issues for the floss world. And I think, one of them, I'd like to start with kind of a second story, which ran in TechCrunch, the title of which was The End of Open Source. And there was a whole list of things in there. And, of course, I've been at this since '94, one way or another, and open source has been declared dead so many times. It's not a dead zombie walking. It never was a zombie in the first place, and the world would not exist if it wasn't for open source. Nor would any progress be happening in civilization or in tech or in anything without open source principles being at work. That's really kind of, open source in some ways is human nature, writ specifically for the tech world. It's kind of, we had to wake up back in '98, the tech world, to the fact that sharing and vetting code with each other and being able, for many of us, to submit patches and bug reports and and the rest of it was really the best way to go about things. But what's happened is that as as deployments of everything are becoming more and more corporatized and verticalized and locked into containers and other things like that, there are more predictions for demise. So I'm wondering what you guys have to say about that. And I'll just aim this one at Dan first, because I'm sure all of you have something to say about it. But there he is. Yeah,
yeah, that's great. When you said aim it at Dan, I kind of went to move out the way.
He could dodge.
Yeah, I think take a dodge. Yeah, for me, it feels a bit like this whole thing about the death of open source. This story just keeps coming up again and again, and it feels a bit like the year of the Linux desktop. Is it this year? It's going to be the year of the Linux desktop. How many times have we heard these things over and over again? I do think it's interesting that there's a lot of stuff is containerized now. You're right about that, and I can see the arguments from people saying that if everything just runs in a black box in a container that we can't actually get into and really understand how it works, then I suppose it's a bit like a binary blob would have been years ago in your code, where you couldn't actually work out what the source code of it was. But the whole container world is running on top of Linux for a start, and then you've got things like all these open source hypervisors out there. You've got other things going on. So I don't think there's a great threat to open source at the moment. In fact, I think it's something else that we say every year, but it just seems to go from strength to strength. You've got the biggest threat to me from open source comes more from a legal side of things, from things like we saw recently with Google and the DMCA and all that kind of stuff, YouTube, all those kind of copyright things are probably more of a danger, in my opinion, than than proprietarization of the source. I don't know what anyone else thinks about it, so I suppose I'll throw it back to you guys.
I think, so this article in particular that Doc threw out there about, it starts off talking about this University of Minnesota situation where they put a bunch of commits in, and then they were banned from contributing to the Linux kernel. And the whole thing is talking about exposing vulnerabilities, basically. And I think that's the whole point. And I find it kind of interesting and weird that there was the correlation between this event and the end of open source, when to me that's the whole point. Like that's what you want. That's why it's open. We're all looking for vulnerabilities, and and if somebody turns one up, I don't certainly think that that's a bad thing, or by any stretch an end of open source. It's a reinforcement of why we do things the way that we do, as I see it.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to say, I cover every week the kind of the security landscape of what's happened over the last week. And I tell you, there's generally two types of stories that I end up covering. One is there is a big vulnerability in an open source project, but it got patched 3 months ago. Make sure you've pulled an update. And there's a big vulnerability in a closed source project. There's no patch available for it yet. And here's all the people that got bit by it. Now, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but that's how it seems to work. People are getting bit by bugs in these black box programs. Kaseya is a management software where an IT company can buy into Kaseya, and then they install those clients on all of their customers. And there was a pair of really nasty bugs. And because the way this particular program worked, a port got exposed to the internet. The bad guys found out about it and got into, I think it was something like 60 of these IT management companies got into their Kaseya backends and ended up putting ransomware on something like 1 million endpoints. Well, all this stuff was closed source, and that was one of the reasons that it went this way. There wasn't an open source community that was able to go in and look at the code and find these really pretty trivial bugs. And so I think the death of open source is being greatly exaggerated here. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the author here on TechCrunch maybe had some points he wanted to score that weren't really related to the security problem, and just kind of tried to mash the two things together.
Yeah, it's possible. I think that there's, it comes down to what you know you don't know, and don't know you don't know, and both of those can hurt you, and both of those are outside the scope of open source, and that's sort of the basic problem there. So I'm kind of not surprised that we're not taking it too seriously. You never know. Often with these headlines are, attention grabbing on purpose. Here's a second story that we may want to unpack, and it's one that ran in the New York Times yesterday, and then I wrote a blog post about it this morning, which has to do with QR codes. It's funny with QR codes. 10 years ago, a good friend of mine who's an author of some code that all of us are using, one way or another, he called QR codes robot barf, and it's a line that caught on for a long time. It's just robot barf, but it's something that I think Toyota, or a contractor for Toyota, invented, and it was put essentially in the public domain, and now it's universally employed. You just see QR codes everywhere, but most commonly lately is in restaurants. It seems like maybe a third of the restaurants have gone to, since we were allowed out of our homes and can go to restaurants now, in much of the world, they publish the menu in a little QR code. Even in the fancy restaurants, they're in this little tiny QR code that's on the table there, and everybody scans it and they look at it. Well, then it turns out you could be tracked, and it's being used to track you, and where QR codes really could have been a wonderful way to start shaking hands with people, or for us to shake hands with a company. Like, you go to a restaurant and you might want to suggest something to the chef later, saying, that was really good. This other thing wasn't so great. You might try a different dressing on this salad, or, the olives were kind of stale, whatever it was. But you can have a constructive relationship with an establishment through a QR code handshake, which I've seen nobody try anywhere. But instead, of course, the restaurant makes a little bit of money by contracting with some company that then tracks you because you've clicked on this QR code, or your phone has acquired a tracker somehow through scanning the QR code. And I don't know whose responsibility is that. I mean, most of us are getting our phones from exactly two places, Apple or Google. If Kyle Rankin was on this call, he's an old colleague of Catherine's and mine, and he's been on a number of our shows. But he's with the Purism phone. But is it up to them? Who's this up to? How do we stop this? Short of regulation, which is like the last thing I want to use.
Well, so let's think about what a QR code, when we use it this way, what is a QR code really? It's essentially a hyperlink in physical form, right? And so it's not a unique problem. It's the same problem that we have everywhere on the web. If tracking is a problem, then, every time you go to a different link, the technology lets somebody track you. It's just the same thing, but now we have a physical representation of it. And I kind of think it's weird to refer to the QR codes as the boogeyman here. But at the same time, I understand why tracking can be a problem. There is an open source solution to this, a couple of them, actually. One is in both of the major browsers, there's an option to open a link in an incognito tab. And that, for the most part, kills tracking. Now, I don't know for sure that that's an option when you go to scan a QR code. I think it could be pretty easily. I just don't know if there's a simple button to do that. That seems like that would be a great idea. But then Mozilla with Firefox is going a step further with this. They're essentially trying to kill tracking altogether, something that Mozilla is calling total cookie protection. And that is essentially a sandbox for your cookies per domain. And so the way most tracking works these days is it's something like you have a Facebook account, which, by the way, even if you don't have a Facebook account, you have a Facebook account. Facebook made one for you. Every website that you go to that has a Facebook button on it, well, when your browser loads that button, it sends a message back to Facebook that says, hey, this person that I'd recognize because of this cookie just visited this website. So Facebook can track wherever you go on the web. Mozilla basically said, we're kind of tired of that. We're going to try to fix that. And so they are now saying all of these cookies that get used to track you, they only work on, twit.tv. And so now Facebook can see, oh, there's somebody at twit.tv. But when you then go over to amazon.com and there's a Facebook button there, there's no correlation between those two if you use Firefox and total cookie protection. So there are solutions for this coming in the pipeline, and they are happening in open source projects. Maybe not fast enough, but it's coming. It's being worked on.
Has anybody used the tabs, the browser? Doc. The containers in Firefox. Have you looked at those? Because they're really nice. You can set up any number of containers that you want, which isolates, makes a sandbox, and you put whatever tabs you want into that sandbox. And then that means only those tabs can kind of talk to each other, if you say. I mean, which is just like what Jonathan was describing. It may even be an extension that they've renamed into Total Cookie Protection, because for a couple of years now they've been doing containers, and I use those quite a lot. They're really, really useful. I just wondered if anybody else had tried that as an approach. You have one for your work, have one for your home. Banking could be separate, all that kind of thing.
I have not, but it's I feel guilty in having not. But but one more time.
You just like cookies. Everybody likes cookies.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm wondering toward what Jonathan was just saying about aside from the Firefox point, which is a great one. Does incognito mode make you invisible? I think in most cases it's just that you forget that you were there, not that they forget you. Is that right? I'm not sure exactly.
No, so incognito mode, basically it blocks the tab that is in incognito mode from getting to any of your other resources. So it can't pull cookies, so that it can't tell who you are. When you access something over incognito mode, basically the only thing a website gets is, of course, your IP address, because that's just the way the internet works. And then it'll get a user agent string, which there may be some randomization of that happens in incognito mode. I'm not sure. But those are basically the only two things that a website gets. It works fairly well at separating the different sites from being able to interact as far as tracking goes.
Excellent. So I think what you're saying is that we don't have to go to Google and Apple to solve this thing. That we, at least the geekier among us, do have some recourse here. Like, it's an interesting thought. On my phone, I do have Firefox as the default browser. If I'm using Firefox, and if my phone looks at a QR code and it opens the Firefox browser, am I, by default, unless I've taken unless I've gone into incognito mode on the phone, safe because Firefox has some?
I don't know if it's
there.
Yeah, I don't know if it's rolled out everywhere yet, and I don't know if it's rolled out on mobile. I'd have to do a little bit more reading into that. Yeah. But I know the options are there. According to this blog post from just a month ago, it is on by default now. I don't know if it's on mobile though. So I mean, there's some questions there. And then you even have things like if you have an Apple phone, even if you're running Firefox, you're not really running Firefox. You're running you're running the Apple browser, and it just has a Firefox skin on top of it. So there's it's not a perfect solution yet. But just the point really I was trying to make is there are steps being made to try to fix some of these problems.
Also, there's Brave, which I really like. And I'm not here to kind of sell anyone a specific browser because I love Firefox and I love what they're doing. But I've started to use Brave quite a lot, which is based on Google Chrome. And Brave's whole marketing kind of pitch is that they will stop cross-site scripting and so on, and it regularly I'm in it now, and it regularly pops up a little window saying here's the things I've blocked when I go to a new site. Now I hope it's really doing that and it's not just trying to make me feel good by saying that, but I'm pretty sure it works quite well. So Brave is really interesting, and it's open source as well, so it's quite an interesting one. It's based on top of Google Chrome, as I said, so there's options for different browsers out there, I think, that people could use. It works on mobile. I know for a fact it works on Android. I haven't tried the iPhone, but I think maybe the bottom line is that there are options for people if they know about them, I suppose.
I think that's a good point. And something Doc said earlier was that the nerdier among us are prepared for this sort of thing. But I think an interesting question about going back to the QR codes in restaurants is its awareness. I think that increasingly most people are aware that Facebook is tracking you. People think that their phones are listening and you're going to get advertised about something you've just said, or whatever it is that people think right now. But I think the more mundane an activity, something like scanning a menu at a restaurant, I think the less people think critically about what's actually going on behind the scenes, maybe. So I think that's a relevant issue here. It's not so much that it's that much different from just visiting any URL. I think the issue is just consumer awareness. I think that's really the heart of the question, is not how geeks should respond to this sort of thing, that's a future problem, but it's how everybody else is responding to this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking here in our own back channel. It's there are so many browsers to kick around right now, and I really like that they're all trying different approaches. I mean, Brave runs on Chromium, which means it'll run some extensions that are Chrome extensions, and it's open source and what they're doing with it. But for that matter, so is, I'm almost certain of this, that Edge, which is Microsoft's, they dropped their old Internet Explorer code, and now they're entirely on Chromium. And I know extensions that work on Chrome will work on it. But some are also based on the Firefox base. I'm trying to think of who is, but they're out there. It's
very many.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm encouraged by that because and Apple, of course, has its own unique thing going on with Safari. And I think downstream, to me, it's sort of like I don't know if we'll ever get full convergence there, but I think downstream we will get to a point where the user experience is going to be one where privacy is presumed because measures are being taken, and it's not you're not going to be given up in one way or another. But one of the lessons, though, that I take from the New York Times story is that the marketers are out there and they still think that, tracking people is a great idea. It's very hard to break them out of that. I actually had a conversation with a company this morning that's doing what's called affiliate marketing. Basically, it's bringing favored companies into an environment of some sort, and I don't want to be too specific about it, but in fact, what they're trying to create is a safe marketplace. It's sort of an interesting thing. It's an environment where there is no tracking. You can't get into it if you're tracking people. So it's like here, what the user will know is that if they're seeing ads or promotional things, or if they express an intention to buy or to shop, they can shop without fear that any of the companies that they encounter there are tracking them. So, but it's very hard to sell for this company to sell that to the marketers of the world, because the marketers are so used to tracking, they don't know another way. It's like, we can't get all this kind of data about people? We need to be able to target them with data and personalize every damn thing there is. When instead what the company's trying to sell is, no, here's an environment where people can trust you, and you appear there and you're being more trustworthy because you're not tracking people.
I honestly kind of think, I think that's probably going to be the solution. That's probably what's going to happen to fix this, is there's going to be companies and websites and browsers that is their selling point, privacy and not tracking. And so we already have Brave. One of the things that they absolutely emphasize is we don't track you, or if you want, and I think Brave even has a cryptocurrency where you can opt into being tracked and you get paid for it. You have things, Duckduckgo, that is a web search tool that one of their big things is we do not track you. And so I can foresee a future where tracking is essentially on. Well, I guess it's not really a future; it's here now. Welcome to reality. Tracking is on by default pretty much everywhere, unless you care enough about it to go and to search out one of these companies' applications, platforms that's where tracking is off, and you're going to have a different experience because it's a different platform. And honestly, it seems like that's going to be the only real option we have to do this, unless, of course, we manage to pass some sort of sweeping legislation to make it illegal. And I don't know that that's a best case solution either. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think the question is market share. I would love for that to be a solution, but if you look at browser stats, the big player, it's mostly Chrome. Everybody uses Chrome. Safari is pretty solid, as far as I know. But then everything else is tiny. Even Firefox, which we think of as a major browser, has a tiny market share. So it suggests that most people aren't paying attention to these kind of things. Most people aren't seeking out a Brave or a DuckDuckGo. That said, I actually read recently that some really impressive stats about DuckDuckGo, and I think they're doing a really great job of outreach. I don't know if it was an episode of this or somewhere else that I was talking about. I saw a DuckDuckGo billboard in like semi-rural Texas, which kind of blew me away. I thought, it was kind of exciting. I thought it was great. I thought, you have to reach people. So, it's not just a bunch of, nerds talking about DuckDuckGo that's going to really reach a large audience. So that was exciting. But at the same time, I don't know how much progress is being made. I think slowly people are becoming more aware, but a lot of market share stats suggest otherwise.
It's interesting how much of it is sorry, Jonathan. It's interesting how much of this is voluntary anyway, though. People say that they're really upset about their data being tracked and all the rest of it. But then, the company in question can just say, would you like to sign up for the free prize draw? You could win this flash car or TV or something, and they're right on it. So, I mean, it's more of a question, I think, of choosing to opt in. It would be nice if you were asked to opt in rather than just being automatically tracked everywhere you go. But a lot of it's down to what they do now is they pitch it in such a way, like Twitter does this, and so many sites do, where they say, do you want to see more relevant ads? So we're going to give you ads. You're getting ads because that's our business model. That makes sense. But if you want ads that are relevant to you from what you need to tell us about yourself, and we need to maybe have the data that we've already got. We need to use that to sell you more relative stuff. So it's almost a choice for the user between, I'm going to see billboard ads effectively, or pop-up ads, or whatever. You don't get pop-ups so much now, but whatever it is. So the question is, do I want to give away some of my privacy to actually get more interesting ads that I might find useful or not? And it's a bit of a dilemma.
Yeah, I was going to throw in there regarding DuckDuckGo. This is kind of an aside, but there's been multiple times when researching something like for an article, or for whatever reason, I go to look for something using Google, which is my go-to search engine, and the thing I'm looking for has been memory hold. Not to use the C word, censorship, but there are things that Google has removed from its search engine. And DuckDuckGo is one of the places that will usually still have the link there. And, if you're doing research, if there's something you're looking for in particular, that's a really interesting use for the alternative browsers too.
It's interesting. I have a kind of an Easter egg word that I put in some old stuff that I wrote back in the 90s, and I wouldn't say what it is because it's mostly a series. It's like a password almost. It's a series of consonants that you can puzzle out into something you can pronounce. And it used to be, and I check often on it, it used to be that Google found these. Google especially found these, and Big would find it too. They're gone, and they're gone from DuckDuckGo as well, because DuckDuckGo I don't think has its own search engine. I think they use the others in some combined way. I'm not sure what it is, but they do. It's clear that what's happened with the search engines, and this is another topic really that we might want to go into. What's happened with the search engines is that it's looking for live relevance and stuff that's current. It's become the old static web where you have sites, all the real estate language, sites with locations and domains that you visit and browse, like it's the library. And everything's organized like a library using, they're all Unix paths basically, and that's how it looks to you. That's what a URL is. And that's kind of fallen by the wayside. Instead, what Google indexes and what Bing indexes and wants to bias is traffic, I think, or some other metrics that have nothing to do with the old page rank, which is how many inbound links does it have. In fact, I don't think they even want you to follow links very much. They've sort of deprecated the entire page rank, the original page rank algorithm, which is really what made Google in the first place. But they're not finding the old stuff. I mean, my archival stuff, for the most part, is invisible on the net now, even if there are inbound links to it. And I think there's a question there really about search. I think the notion behind, we depend on exactly two companies and derivatively more, including ones like DuckDuckGo and SmartPage, I think is another one, that that treat the web as a giant haystack, and because they've indexed the haystack, they can search through that haystack for you. But a lot of the hay is lost. It's all rotted at the bottom, and you can't get to it. And it's a model of the internet that's based on live traffic or on some other metrics we don't even know. We have no idea exactly. We have ideas, but we don't really know. And so I'm wondering whether our view of the web and of the internet is either skewed or obsolete, or if we need some whole other system for approaching all this. But it seems to me we're at the end of an era and in the middle of another one, which is not exactly ideal.
It's a bit like the whole thing with search bubbles, which I'm sure we've probably all looked at in the past. That's one of the big things with Google is the more you search for certain things, the more they will give you, stuff related to that. So you're not actually seeing everything that's out there. You're seeing what's within your kind of bubble, your search bubble, and certain things can get lost. And it's a shame. But something I was reading earlier today, I don't want to take the conversation too much away from what you were talking about. It was that the next, we've been talking about browsers, and we all remember the big browser wars back in the day when Internet Explorer 6 was everywhere and all that kind of stuff, the big big behemoth that it was. But I was reading today about apparently the new kind of battleground for all of this is what we're doing right now, talking audio and video, VoIP and video, and people like Microsoft are trying to use Teams. They're integrating Teams into Windows 11 to such a level that you have to have it, and they want everyone to do that. So it's all these different companies vying. It's an interesting one. I don't know if anyone's looked into that, the new battleground, which is Zoom, Teams, Skype, all these other things.
Yeah, that definitely made the news a while back with I think it was Zoom that had a couple of security issues, and then when so many people started using it, there were some strange things happening, like people breaking into Zoom calls because, well, for various reasons, mostly things like putting the link on the public internet. And then, of course, there was a bit of a scare with, Zoom is partially owned by a Chinese company, which for certain things is a legitimate concern. If you're in the Department of Defense, you probably don't want to use video conferencing for classified information that's owned by someone in China. That's a legitimate concern. But it was quite the fight and battle for mind share between a few of these companies. Yeah, it was really interesting to see, Dan.
Was Zoom actually? I know it's run by Eric Yuan, who is of Chinese ancestry. Is it actually owned by is Zoom actually owned to some degree by Chinese companies? I have no idea. It's a publicly traded company, so I suppose it can be owned by all kinds of entities.
I looked into that at one point, and it seems like it's actually owned by somebody or by a group in the U.S., but they have an office in China where apparently a lot of their coding happens. And so there was a bit of a concern there that, the Chinese government could send the equivalent of a national security letter to the engineers in the Chinese office and say, all right, you need to put this code into here. And so who knows?
But we're getting back to where this discussion started, aren't we? Which is great, which is open source is the way to do it, because we can't see what's in Zoom because it's a proprietary piece of software. If it was open source, then we'd be able to see if anyone was putting anything into it.
Yeah, which leads straight into the point that, man, there are some excellent open source video conferencing solutions. I mean, you've got OBS Ninja, which Dan is using right now. There's Galean, which our friend Dave Tatt really likes and is pushing. You can roll your own with Jitsi. There's a couple of others. You could set your own Asterisk instance up if you really wanted to. I mean, there are ways to do it open source, for sure.
I haven't heard of Galean. I'll have to look into that. Jitsi,
I think you said Jolene. I was just about to get my Dolly Parton record.
Galean. Jolene.
Yeah.
Because they've got a built-in, I mean, I don't know if Dolly would be up for it, but they've got a built-in song they could use for the advert.
Oh.
Yeah, there are people there that would make good guests on the show. I mean, we've had on, what's the other one? Oh my gosh, I'm jumping. I'm making the mistake of looking for something while talking about it and taxing my mind. But OBS Ninja. I think actually, Dan, you're on here using OBS Ninja, which is an open source alternative, and we've had people from that on. But Galean's another one, and I've found it pretty useful when I've talked to Dave and others on it. I wanted to add on the browser topic before we jump to the next one that one I use a lot, it's probably more than any other right now, is Epic, which is I think it's Firefox based. I'm almost certain it's Firefox based. They're advertised as a private browser. You don't even have history. I mean, if you want to look for history, it's not there. It will remember links for you if you wanted to, but it's basically meant to forget everything as you're doing it. And but searches in searching on Google or Bing are interesting that way because it's basically not following everything you're doing and giving you something that's closer to organic. Epic is now Chromium based. Jonathan saying in the back channel. So there you go. I can be wrong how many times in one show. But yeah, so there we go. So anyone of you want to bring up another topic? We've got about 20 minutes left here.
I actually posted about right to repair the FTC thing. I don't know how interesting that is to y'all, but I thought it was pretty interesting as somebody who's been around a while and seen the struggles with and struggled personally with having things repaired and repairing things myself. I think this is it's big news in that it's a new posture, I suppose. It's not a new law or anything like that, but it's a formally taking a position, on the right to repair, which I think is encouraging. And I wondered what y'all thought about that.
This is the FTC taking a position, right?
The FTC.
Yeah, the FTC have actually come out and said they think it's a good idea.
We've been following Right to Repair over at Hackaday for a long time now, and there's some crazy stories about one of the big ones that really get hurt by this is farmers that have particularly John Deere equipment. They'll have something break on their new big combine tractor, and they've got to wait 5 or 6 hours for a tech with the laptop that has the John Deere software on it to come and plug into their tractor to basically just clear a bit that says, something went wrong. Okay, click. Somebody was telling me a story just the other day about a piece of equipment that I don't remember if that was John Deere or not, but it was a seed planter, and one farmer bought one and started planting his fields for all the people around him, and got to one field and it just stopped working. And they spent hours and hours and hours trying to troubleshoot it, and come to find out the piece of hardware had a limitation that it could only plant so many acres. And I think they had to buy a license to be able to plant additional acres. And that ties into the right to repair, because if you have something that's opened up by law because you have the right to repair it, then you can go in and you can fix something silly like that. And I think as more people are exposed to this kind of craziness where they've got something that they know they should be able to fix and they can't fix it, I think right to repair is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because it is based on the idea of what property ownership actually means. Exactly, and that's been a part of U.S. and British common law for centuries now. And I think probably this is just right to repair is just the codified law catching up to the way this should obviously work. So I think right to repair is probably going to happen. I think it's probably inevitable.
I hope so. And I'm glad I brought it up now. Those are some really good examples. I think that, it does affect people in areas that the rest of the population doesn't think of. I didn't consider, John Deere tractors, but of course, obviously that's the perfect place to take advantage of the lack of protection here. Right. So the more that sort of thing is exposed, the better.
And it's ironic, particularly in that instance, because you have farmers that are running literally 70-year-old equipment out in their fields. I mean, it is still common, especially in this part of the country, it is still common to ride around and see old Ford tractors that were built in the 50s or the 40s. People are still out using. And some of these, especially the diesel models, they're so easy to get on and wrench on. A farmer can have one break down and do a total rebuild in a day. And it's such a difference on a modern machine. It's so different. You can't even get into them without having the vendor software, and it drives people crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could have a whole other show about ownership, right? I mean, what do we own? Look around our house and our devices and figure out if we actually own very many of them.
In some cases, I'm not even sure if owning. Like I'm in an apartment in New York. We're renting this apartment. Unfortunately, the guy on the second floor now is the one who fixes the place, not the guy on the third floor, which is me. But when there are problems with the oil burner and the I guess the gas burner, it's the heater for the whole apartment in the basement. I don't even know when this thing was built. It was built probably in the 50s or 60s, and it's the original burner. There's no mystery in it whatsoever. It's got a pilot light in it. It has 4 zones, and the zones are turned on and off by 2 wires that either open or close when you open or close the thermostat on each floor. It's just a simple old Honeywell type thermostat that's got this little mercury trip in it. And in fact, I got a new thermostat for our apartment, and it wouldn't work with it because it didn't even have a ground line. It was just like these two wires, but it was repairable. I could do it. I mean, in order to fit in the hole in the wall, it's turned sideways, but you can at least read the temperature if you turn your head sideways. It's a repairable building. They go into the basement. There are no mysteries there. I know how to fix everything that's in there, and we could bring in somebody from the gas company, the electric company, or some other thing, and they can walk in there. They can fix it. All of the toilets and the rest of it here, there's nothing here that is not fixable by people who live here. And that's huge. And then for me, especially when I was young, I was a shade tree mechanic. I wasn't a great mechanic by any stretch, but I didn't have much money for a good car. And I just carried a box of tools in the trunk and would fix whatever went wrong with it. That's not the way cars work anymore. I mean, they're guaranteed by the company for a certain number of miles, and you have to bring it into the dealer as somebody who's able to stick something proprietary into the ODB2 port and read off what's there. And then there are fights about that kind of stuff. And the cars track you as well. They've all got cell phones in them now. The new ones do, that are busy tracking you in most cases, unless you know how to opt out of that. That's wrong too. There's some interplay between a company being able to know something about the use of their products, while at the same time the users of those products being able to fix them or bring them to somebody who can fix them, rather than only back to the company that made them and may not be able to fix them. And I think that we have to talk about a right to repair is, I think, a sign of broken times in a way.
Has everybody here heard of the Repair Cafe movement? And I'm wondering how well that's spread around the world. So I'm very fortunate in that where I live in Liverpool, we have a hacker space or a maker space called Does Liverpool, which I've mentioned before. So anybody in the area, if you want to do anything like fix your stuff, that's the place to go. But they have a monthly event, which is the Repair Cafe, and it's part of a global movement. You just register your chapter of the Repair Cafe. And as it sounds like, people bring their stuff along and we look at it and we try and fix it, or we help them to fix it, which is the best way to do it, is they get to fix it themselves. And there are so many of these things. So if anybody listening to this or watching this, I would say, wants to learn about repairing their items, have a look and see if there's a Repair Cafe in your area, because they're really great.
It is great.
That is really cool. Repaircafe.org. And did that start in Liverpool, Dan?
No, I don't think so. But we do have a chapter here. I couldn't tell you exactly where it did start, but I'm hoping it will spread out more and spread around the world as people get into the idea of maybe before you throw something away, see if you can fix it.
Yeah, there's obviously that environmental concern, and it just sucks how disposable everything is. There's a culture of accepting the disposability of everything that we buy, and it's frustrating.
There's a metric I ran across the other day, and just in a conversation, which is we were actually at there's a chain of stores here called Home Goods, and it's the kind that you walk around it and they're like fake flowers and really crapola chests of drawers and good and bad rugs and other things, but a lot of knickknacks. And the conversation went like this: everything here is going to go into one of several places. It's going to go to a landfill. It's going to go to a garage sale or a thrift shop. It's going to be owned, or it's going to, these, and there's a ratio here. What you buy at the jewelry shop is going to be owned, right? Or it's going to be re-owned. But what you buy at at the dollar store, 90% of it is going to be either consumed immediately or in the short term, or is going to go to a landfill, or is just going to get tossed in the garbage. But the idea is actually you would do research on this, talk about tracking. It'd be an interesting thing to do. I scan the QR code on something, and all I want to do is let you know whatever happened to this, right? And where does it go? That's an interesting question. Where does all this crap go? It's because we're throwing way too much stuff away. I don't know. Any of you guys have thoughts about that?
So I'll jump in and I'll talk about that for a second. There's definitely a movement of people, I think probably people that are like-minded to us, that look for some of those things and try to figure out how they can reuse them. There was an article we ran on Hackaday just the other day about I think it was a disposable COVID test that had electronics in it and had a Bluetooth chip in it. And it was literally just, I don't remember exactly how it worked, whether it was saliva-based or what, but you would run the test and then you would download the app on your phone and then you would scan over the low-energy Bluetooth, and it would then tell you over your phone what the test result was. And we ran this article because it just blew our minds that something this simple, because it's just a visible indicator. And when they pull it apart, it's the visible indicator, and then it was I think an LED on one side and a photoreceptor on the other, and it would detect how much light is going through this visible indicator, which would then tell the Bluetooth chip whether or not the test was positive, whether the test was positive or negative. And it was just so mind-blowing that they put this much effort into something that should be that simple. And of course, over at Hackaday, people are immediately thinking, well, can you pull the Bluetooth chip out and reflash it and use it? And well, yes, you probably can. And so there is this group of people that has this idea that all of these useful things, we should be able to reuse them. But it's ridiculous, the disposability of things. Like some things, it makes sense for it to be disposable, but there are so many things that shouldn't be disposable that are. It is a little infuriating.
I had a thought. We had the subject of a few weeks ago was making, and I think that's almost the flip side of right to repair, is the right to make something. And I mean, when I was a kid, you could make a radio. You could make, I didn't make the ham radio I used, but actually the first receiver I made my stereo equipment. I made a Dynaco preamps and power amps and FM tuners and Heathkit stuff, which is amazingly good, most of it. And you knew what all of it did. I have an FM transmitter at our house in Santa Barbara that I use to distribute sound around a house, and is kind of a small pirate station for the neighborhood, because people can tune in and listen to my music if they want. And that's entirely made out of solder and transistors and loose parts that, are a kit, and I can make it and I can fix it. And I can call up the company that sold it to me and say, I'm not getting this out of it. Well, what do I need to do? And they can help me out. And that's, I wouldn't say that's lost, but I think that's an important flip side of things, that humans need to be able to invent things. They need to be able to put things together. My grandkids do that. They're wanting to make things all the time. It's part of being people, I think. And I think it's an important part of the open source world as well.
So I've thought about kind of this idea about commoditization, turning things into appliances. I usually think about it in terms of computers, because I have to come and solve problems for people regarding their computers. And sometimes the problems I solve are embarrassingly simple. And there's been, I think, 3 times within the last week, I've come out and I've fixed something for someone, and they've looked at me and they've gone, was that it? Was that really all we needed to do? And it's like, yeah, it was just, in one case, it was you had the printer on the Wi-Fi and the USB plugged in, and that particular printer didn't like having both. But I've thought about this for years now. It used to be that for someone to have a computer, they had to be something of a computer expert. And for more and more people to get into computing, the bar for entry has to be lowered further and further. And I'm not trying to be mean about this. I think this is literally the way this works. And for that bar of entry to be lowered, we've had to turn computers, and this applies to a lot of other things, we've had to turn computers into appliances. So rather than you've got to, get on the terminal and run these commands, like the old Commodore 64, there was a pretty hard to remember command to run to be able to actually load something from a disk. Well, nowadays you just double click on your web browser and then you type the thing you want into Google and it makes it all work magically. And I think that maybe this idea of we've lost the ability to make, I don't think we have. I think there's still a group of us out there that does it. It's just so many people either don't have the ability or don't have the interest to go out and make it themselves. I mean, for a lot of us, we don't have the time to make it ourselves. I'm running into that more and more. And so it becomes so easy to just go out and spend some money on the solution to have an appliance. We don't care about what's inside of it. We don't care about how to repair it. It's buy the appliance and it works for what we need. And I'm not sure if that trade-off is worth it or not. I think once in a while, like, man, wouldn't it be nice if we went back to the times? What's that? Oh yeah, I am.
Breaking up a bit there.
I may have. I just
you completely broke up for about 30 seconds. I hate to say that. We might want to retake that.
I've got a local recording of it if we want to patch it in. I'm just going to say I wonder whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing that we have so many people that use computers that don't know a whole lot about them. So I don't know. It's a kind of a philosophical question.
But I mean, people have been using appliances for a long time and now had the ability to repair them, in the past. I feel like, things just used to, last longer, and it was expected that you would call somebody and have them repaired instead of replaced. I don't know. It's a different mindset that I'd like to see changed.
And you mentioned before, Doc, that the flip side is right to repair, and then there's all the other stuff. But I'm not sure they're so mutually exclusive, because often you can make something new out of something old, if you know what I mean. You can use that as a constituent part of a new thing. So it all kind of feeds itself in a nice cycle. You could repurpose something to make it into something new.
Yeah, I don't know why. As Jonathan was talking, as I was thinking about appliances, I thought about how appliances at their beginning in many cases are really simple. We hear the expression going through the ringer. At our summer place in the 1950s, I'm that old, as a kid, we had no electricity and we had outdoor plumbing. It was in the woods in southern New Jersey. And but we had a ringer wash machine where the agitator, the thing in the middle, you actually hand cranked it. You actually washed clothes with a hand crank, and then you had another crank as you put it through these two cylinders that were the ringer. And when we did get electricity, we actually had a toaster. There was this very clever thing that allowed you to toast one side and then the other. It had the heating elements facing outward, and you took these two levers and flipped around the bread. You toasted one side, then you toasted the other. And that thing had to have been 40 or 50 years old at the time. And it was about as simple as the thing could be. Exactly. Dan, and going through the ringer. Most people don't know what going through the ringer means. It means being crushed between two rotating cylinders, which are those things are parts of people's lives if they wash their own clothes for a long time. And now almost nobody knows what that means anymore, but that's what that is. We're getting down toward the end of this. I know we started at 35 after the hour, so we're probably like 2.5 minutes away from that. What are the turns that we've left unstoned at this point that we might want to? Let's see, 4 minutes I see that we have left.
There was one thing I wanted to mention very quickly. People can go and read about it, but Cassandra 4 has just been released, and I've read a fascinating article. I'll give you the links for the show notes and things about Netflix. So Cassandra, very quickly, is a NoSQL database. I'm explaining this not to you guys because I know you probably know all this, but maybe somebody listening doesn't. So it's a NoSQL database, and it's just been released, Cassandra 4, and they've made a 4-fold increase in speed on the way it searches for things. And Netflix are one of the major people. It's like the core of their business is all run on these NoSQL databases with Cassandra. So I thought that was quite interesting. I don't know if anybody else has seen that at all.
I had not. I don't follow databases. I don't follow stuff like that as much anymore. I'm so like in Drupal world all the time now that I kind of miss all of those broader stories that that we used to talk about back in the olden days, Doc and I on Linux Journal.
Yeah, back when Linux had a journal, and technically it still exists, but
now we've got System D as a journal in it.
Journal D.
Journal D. It does, doesn't it? There literally is a Linux kernel, a Linux journal now in the system.
There's, there's success. I remember, back around in the late 90s, there was an internet world. Who would have an internet world now? It's like having Telephone World or something like that, or Telephony World or something like that. It's not what we need. So, anybody else have I guess we could actually go at this point into our plugs for various things. I do want to say that next week we have on. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. But I'll go back to it. You guys tell me what you're plugging, and I'll bring up I want to be accurate about it. Nick Vidal of the Open anniversary. That open source has an anniversary, and it's coming up, and it's worth celebrating. So and he's done a lot of work on this, and it's interesting stuff. So tune in next week for that. I'm sort of going out of order here.
I'm next in the line. Yeah. All right. I'll mention, I've referenced it a couple of times during the show, but hackaday.com, every Friday morning, my security article goes live. And then also you can follow me on Twitter at JP_Bennett. Yeah, there's my latest little write-up. That one's not security related. That's just something I came across. JP_Bennett. You can follow me on Twitter, kind of get an inside look at the security articles I am following. And you can even tag me with stuff there. If you see something you think I should know about, think I should cover, let me know. I enjoy getting that fodder from folks. So follow me in those two places.
Yeah, are we going along the line? Does that mean I'm next?
Yeah, we have a line.
Okay,
for those of you.
I thought you were going to have us all. You know, when we came on before and you were introducing us, I was waiting for you to say sound off. I was waiting for us to tell us all to sound off. Like, are we going to do a roll call or something? Anyway, yes. So I've recently started a brand new podcast, in fact. It's about music. It's called On the Record. And it's basically the basic idea is that each time somebody comes on and picks a record that means something to them, and we use that as the starting point for a discussion. So as you can see if you're watching the video, there was a Susie and the Banshees one, was our first Spellbound, a song by Susie and the Banshees. And it's about 20-30 minutes long, the podcast, so it's not a huge long thing. And the idea is we're going to get people on every week, and I've got a custom piece of artwork that I had made by the guy who's on our first episode. This is a custom-made piece of artwork as well, which apologies for people on the audio-only stream.
What's the name of the podcast? It has a name. It looks like
On the Record, it's called.
On the Record, okay.
That was my attempt at a pun, because it's on each episode is about a different record.
Oh, I see. It's on
and I call them records because I'm... Yeah, much like you, Doc. I'm not quite as old, I don't think, but I do still think of music as records, the round things that you can put onto like a turntable, which actually are still around because people quite like them now. They're quite cool again. So yeah, if you go to ontherecordpod.com, you can find that there. And for anything else, you can go to danlynch.org. And I think that's probably enough of your time taken up. So over to Catherine.
Sure. That's a really cool podcast, by the way. I'm going to have to check it out, or it's a cool idea.
Thank you.
So let's see. You can find me pretty easily on Twitter at Catherine D. Reality2cast.com. You can hear more about especially privacy issues with me and Doc. And use Drupal, and especially use Acquia CMS if you want to be extra cool. And I think that's about all I've got. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I'd like to actually just go ahead and once again plug next week's show. It's on it's Nick Vidal of Open Anniversary and Open Anniversary 2021, celebrating the 30th anniversary of Linux and the World Wide Web. I got to get more than one thing in there, but he's put a lot of work into it, and so that's at aniv.co if you want to be prepped for it and get in on their back channel and talk with us about it. So that's a little plug for next week. Always a fun show. So thank you guys, all of you, for making this an entertaining hour that I hope is useful for the fullness of time, because the issues are never going to go away. The problem space is always fully occupied. I think that's how we wouldn't have open source without it. So see you next week, everybody.
Hey, if you like tech news, but you also like hearing about it from the people who are actually writing the stories, well, I've got a show for you. It's called Tech News Weekly, and it's me, Jason Howell, along with my co-host, Micah Sargent. Every week, we invite the people making and breaking the biggest tech news stories from around the web onto this show to talk to us about it. It's a lot of fun. You should check it out. Tech News Weekly can be found at twit.tv/TNW every Thursday. We'll see you there.